You're listening to Brave Girls with Tracy M., where we choose to empower you to be a better leader, mentor, and coach in the world. We'll share stories of people who have achieved great heights by overcoming adversity and rising to the challenge, all while pursuing their passions. These courageous people will inspire you to have faith in yourself and take bold action. Right here with the host of Brave Girls, Tracy M.
This is episode 69, Speaking Your Brand with Carol Cox. Today's guest is Carol Cox from sunny Orlando, Florida. A fellow podcaster, she's a true expert in public speaking and business storytelling that I really connected with. Carol's also passionate about seeing more women in leadership and sees her mission to help more women secure positions of influence and leadership on stages, in boardrooms, in the media, in communities, and in politics. A student of culture and history, Carol has had a storied career in television as a political analyst, as well as a college professor and a software developer. I loved hearing her Brave Girl story, which included working in the technology sector and how she now teaches others how to create their signature talk to gain visibility for their brands. Carol and I talked about the power of storytelling and how she teaches her clients best practices in public speaking. Carol also explains the process used to create a Tedx Talk and what she recommends if you're considering creating one. Carol has created a framework to create your signature talk that has resulted in multiple client successes on the stage. She talks about how to embed and integrate information into your talk to generate sales leads. She shares many of her free resources to help you on your path as a speaker through her website. We also talk about how to market yourself as a speaker to include creating a landing page on your website, letting people know that you're available to speak, and then how to position yourself on LinkedIn. We also talk about how to build your confidence muscle by practicing public speaking and how to create a know, like, and trust factor. We also talk about our podcasting journey and why we both love this medium. Carol's podcast, Speaking Your Brand, is a must-listen-to show if you want to be a public speaker. She's produced over 145 episodes that you can download to learn more about leadership, public speaking, and creating a framework for your talks. We both agree on the need to be consistent and have interesting content when you commit to launching a podcast. Carol and I talk about how podcasting is really a long game marketing play for your business. I also love that the bravest thing that Carol's ever done and how it inspires her today. So let's go and meet my friend, Carol Cox from sunny Orlando, Florida.
So welcome to Brave Girls with Tracy M. Tonight, I'm really excited because I have Carol Cox, who is the CEO of Speaking Your Brand. She also has a podcast of the same name. She's based in Orlando, Florida, and I just want to say welcome to the show, Carol.
Well, thank you, Tracy. I am thrilled to be here.
Yes. So in reading through your bio, you are an expert in public speaking, business storytelling, and you have a passion around women's leadership. All of these things are things that I'm interested in too. So give me a little bit of your backstory, because I know you have a really interesting background that has kind of led you to this point. And so I was also kind of curious. I was like, how does a history major go from a history major to political analyst on TV news to professor to podcaster? So tell your story.
I know it seems when people ask or when I look at it, it seems very disconnected, but I think actually my story is not that unusual. I think a lot of us, especially in this day and age, we end up with different careers or different areas of focus in our careers at different seasons of our life or different times of our life. So I always loved reading and learning and history when I was growing up. So I loved learning about different people and different cultures, places, time periods. So that's what drew me to history. And I love research and analysis and critical thinking and problem solving and putting all the pieces together. And that's what you do in history. So I majored in that, and then I went and got my master's in history. But along the way, it was a PhD program that I was in at the time. My husband, he was in a software development. And so during one summer, in grad school, I didn't take classes during the summer. So I was off. And he said, well, Carol, you're not doing any work right now. You don't have any classes. why don't you learn the computer programming and help me with my software projects? Because this was back in the dot-com boom era. So early 2000s, late 1990s era. And we lived in Atlanta, Georgia at the time. So there were lots of companies that needed software development. So being the avid learner that I am, I'm like, sure, I'll learn it, not knowing what I was getting myself into, that it was going to last for as long as it did. So I actually ended up enjoying it because I like solving problems. So that was another way, just a totally different way of solving problems. So we ended up starting a technology company, did work for large corporations, built a lot of their systems, in-house systems, and then decided that that route was going to be much more financially stable than trying to find adjunct teaching jobs, which is pretty much what you did in academia back then and still do. So I went into technology, and after about 10 or 12 years of doing that, I got burnt out. Got burnt out with the programming. It got to the point where it was no longer fun for me. But along the way, I was doing a lot of public speaking. So going to technology conferences, going to marketing and business conferences, people would invite me to speak. So I was doing marketing along the way in addition to technology. And so I enjoyed that aspect of it a lot. And so then when I decided, okay, I needed to exit the web development software business and find something else to do. And I talked to some friends and colleagues and they said, Carol, you're so great at speaking. Your presentations are always so good. Why don't you do something around that? So I said, So I started kind of like just noodling on that. And Speaking Your Brand was born basically just out of thinking, where can I contribute value? And especially because I want more women in positions of leadership and influence, and public speaking and visibility is one of the best ways for us to literally see women in positions of influence, but then for them to create that platform so they can go then run for office or serve on a board or grow their business, whatever it happens to be. So it really was a nice way for me to marry all of these different interests that I had.
Yeah, that's crazy amazing that you just learn software development. Like, people don't do that. Like, I'm just going to help my husband do software development. I'm very impressed.
Okay, but I was also 25 years old at the time. And I think when you're younger, right, you're I don't know, you're more receptive to doing things like that, maybe.
Yeah. Well, and I think also, you're like, I'm just going to figure it out. I think that's our attitude when we're in our 20s. So, the other thing that I find really interesting is that you're really into business storytelling. And I too am into business. Well, I'm into storytelling just in general. And I think, as you work with your clients, a lot of it is around them telling stories, right? In their signature talks, in their TED Talks and things like that. So talk a little bit about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is where my background in history definitely comes in, because history is really about stories, the stories we tell about ourselves and about our identities and how we look at ourselves, either ourselves or other countries, other peoples, other cultures, and so on. So, and then I forgot to even mention the political background that I had. So I got involved in politics and then became a political analyst on TV news, which I still do during election season. But when I was involved in local politics, we would recruit candidates to run for office. So they had to tell their story, and they had to tell their story in a way that resonated with their voters. And so again, I still use that even today with Speaking Your Brand and helping my clients develop their signature talk. Your story is important because people want to understand more about you, but it's taking your personal story and universalizing it. So that's what you do in history, that's what you do in politics, and that's what you should do in business as well with business storytelling. Is take your personal story, but then universalize it for your audience so they can see themselves in your story, learn from it, and then recognize, I can get to that place too. I'm here where this person started. This person has achieved this or gotten to this other point. I now can see there's a pathway for me to get there as well.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's where sometimes people miss the boat when they are doing public speaking, is that they can't tell their transformational story from point A to point B and how they got there, because that's what people want to know, is how did that happen, or were you really back at this point where I am today? And so I do think that that's really important. So I know one aspect of your business is that you also coach people on putting together their Tedx Talk, which is totally a different animal from what I understand. So talk a little bit about Tedx Talk.
Yes, Tedx Talks are incredibly fulfilling to do them as the speaker, as the person creating them. They're incredibly fulfilling for me to help clients with, to create, because they are so unique. They're unique in a few ways. First, because they're very short. So TED started with 18-minute talks. Now most TEDx chapters, so TEDx chapters are the local chapters that people can start. So in different cities and universities have them. Now they really want your talk to be between 8 and 10 minutes. That's it. So if you think 8 to 10 minutes, I mean, this interview is going to last at least 30 minutes. 8 to 10 minutes is like nothing, except it does help when you have to memorize it. That is so you have a lot to memorize. But so what makes it so challenging is because you have to really stay on one central point. You have one through line in your talk. And like I like to say is that imagine you have a spine of your talk, whatever that main message is. Anything you're saying has to hang off that spine directly. If it doesn't, it gets cut. It can't be way over there off on the side because it's not, you just don't have time for it. It has to be so compact and very cohesive. So, and then the other thing with TEDx talks that are challenging is that you have to have a big idea. So these are not lead generation talks that you're going to do at conferences or networking groups, which a lot of my clients, that's the main thing that we help them with is lead generation, signature talks. But TEDx Talks is a big idea. It's an idea we're spreading. What is something new or unusual or counterintuitive that you have to share, that you have an expertise in or a background in? Because you have to have something that's why you're the one that's credible to talk on that topic and then to share it. So let me give you a classic example that they use a lot. So a topic, just a regular topic, would be something like homelessness is a problem. So we all kind of nod our heads like, yes, we all agree homelessness is a problem. That's not a TED-worthy idea. It's been said before. There's nothing new or unusual in that statement. But if I said to you, homelessness is a problem, did you know that most people who are homeless prefer to be homeless? I don't know if that's true or not, but let me just say if I said that. Most people who are homeless prefer to be homeless. All of a sudden, what's your reaction? Oh, tell me more.
Right.
I didn't know that. I want to hear more. So you're sparking curiosity, saying something that's different or unusual, and that's what makes a TED-worthy idea.
Right. And I think some people think, oh, well, I do public speaking all the time. I can do a TED Talk, and they don't know that nuance, and they don't hire somebody like you to help them. Really, because they'll fall completely flat on their face if they're not using their 8 to 10 minutes effectively.
Yes, exactly. So I have a client of mine, her name is Tammy Lally, and we worked together on her TEDx talk in 2017. And she had a very personal story, unfortunately, a very tragic family story, but she was ready to share the story. It had been about 10 years since this event had happened. And she was ready to share it because she knew it could profoundly impact the people who would hear the message. And so we worked really hard on that. She worked incredibly hard on that. And she again, we took her personal story, but we universalized it for the audience. Her talk now has almost 2 million views on it. TED, the parent organization, picked it up, put it on their homepage, and it now has that. And so it has been amazing for her. She's written a book now from it. She's been on my podcast a couple of times talking about the impact of doing that has had on her, both personally and for her business. So doing a TEDx talk can be extremely impactful on you and your business. But of course, not everyone's going to get 2 million views. So I always tell people, don't do it expecting to get that result. Do it because you truly, number one, you enjoy the exercise of creating that type of talk, and because you have a message that you just feel like you want to get on to say on a stage, and you want to have that video out there for people to be able to find and watch.
Right. So how did you transition into the political analyst space or the sort of the elected official? Were you just as a curious kind of citizen that wanted to get involved in kind of local politics and make an impact? Because I think a lot of people shy away from it, or they don't realize that they can play in that space with the skills that they have, and they can make a difference.
Yes, absolutely. And they can. And really, they say all politics is local. And there are so many things that happen at the local level, city, county, regional, state level, that impact us every day, whether it's schools or infrastructure, the roads, things that are initiatives that are going on in your area, where local government is really the ones who are making those decisions. So I've always been interested in politics ever since I was in high school. Couldn't wait to turn 18 so I could register for vote to vote. I'm one of those types of kids. And so we had moved to Orlando in 2003. And the 2004 presidential election was coming up. And so we wanted to campaign for I'm on the Democratic side. So we wanted to campaign for whoever the Democratic candidate ended up being. And so we went to our local Democratic Party in our county and said, basically, how can we get involved? So we did volunteer work and, did different things for them. And then so the election came and went. And so then we kind of ended up learning about local races, because most people kind of focus on presidential races and Senate races, and they forget about local races. But because we had been involved in the local party, we learned about the importance of local races. And so we started getting involved in that. And then the group of people who were running the party said, basically, Carol, why don't you run for chairperson? And I was barely 30 years old at the time. So I was like, okay. You asked me to do something, I'm basically going to do it. So I said, okay. So became chairperson, super young. And also because I had a technology background, and this was 2005. So kind of still early days, technology wise and web wise, but we brought a lot of technology into the local party, into the state party. And we built another business for that. So got involved in that, but we did a whole big media PR campaign. And so the local news picked up on that, invited me to come on to represent the Democratic side. And then once they have your name and number and you do a good job, they keep calling you back. So now 15 years later, they still call me back to do it during election seasons. Even though I'm no longer chairperson of the party, like that ended at the end of 2006, but that didn't matter to them.
Right. Well, and you've, established yourself as an expert and somebody that can provide a viewpoint and speak publicly, clearly, succinctly, to understanding like what happens at the local level and the impact. So that's exciting. So to talk a little bit about your podcasting journey too.
Yes. Oh, I love talking about podcasts. And so I know, Tracy, you love podcasts. I'm sure the people obviously who are listening to this podcast right now enjoy listening to podcasts. I've been listening to podcasts since like 2008, 2009. So pretty early on, back in the day when I had those little tiny iPods that didn't even have Wi-Fi on them. So I had to plug the iPod into my laptop and transfer the podcast files from my laptop to the iPod. And there was like 2 or 3 podcasts that I listened to. That is it. Now I have like 40 different shows on my phone. And those 2 that I started listening to back then are still going strong 10 years later. It's amazing. I know. So I would put them on my little iPod, go for a run, do whatever. So I love podcasting. So I knew I wanted to have a podcast. I just didn't know what it was going to be because Speaking Your Brand hadn't been born yet. And I didn't want to do it on web development and software or anything like that. So and then 2016 was a super big, busy election cycle. So I didn't have time to do it at that. And so I knew as soon as the election cycle was over, I wanted to start my podcast for Speaking Your Brand. So I launched in February 2017. So it's been now, well over 2 years since then. And I love it. I actually identify a lot as a podcaster as far as like a title, to give myself a title. That is one that I really identify with a lot because I love the medium. I love the way that we get to have conversations with people who we never met or otherwise never would have had an opportunity to meet. And then people get to listen to our conversations, which is so cool.
I feel the same way. I was an avid podcast listener and I just couldn't get enough of podcast listening. And I, became very discerning about which ones I liked, which ones I didn't like, what formats I liked, which interviewers I liked. And so I've always been in communications. And so I've done a lot with a lot of different mediums, but never podcasting. And I went to Podcast Movement in 2016 in Chicago. And I got completely overwhelmed and thought, I'm out. This is great. I'm just going to keep listening. But something kept tugging at me that you've got to figure this out. You can do this. It's not going to be that hard. And then I did John Lee Dumas's Podcaster's Paradise course, and I had actually got to meet him and Kate Erickson at Podcast Movement, and they were like, you got to do this. So it took me a really long time because I just wasn't sure, because to really do it right, like you said, those 2 original ones are still going strong. Those are the best ones, the ones that are sustainable, and the ones that, every Monday they're going to drop an episode, or Thursday they're going to drop an episode. Those were my favorites. And I wasn't sure if I was willing to make the commitment. And then finally I was like, I need to just try this. And I've met the most amazing people. I've had the most amazing conversations. A big part of why I wanted to do it was to showcase women and their stories and their businesses, and create this platform to share our voices and our conversations. And I've just been blown away by the impact that we as individuals with this skill can bring to the world on so many different levels. And I'm sure you've seen the same thing.
Oh, yes. And I love it when people tell me that they want to start a podcast. And people sometimes say, well, are there too many podcasts out there? Is it becoming saturated? And I said, no, because people want different topics. They want different styles. They like different types of podcasts, different hosts resonate with different people. So even if there's lots of podcasts on public speaking or women's entrepreneurship or women's leadership, but we don't have to listen to all of them. And a lot of times though, we will listen to several in the same category. So I tell people, yes, if you have the interest and you're willing to make the commitment for consistency, to your point, Tracy, being consistent is probably the number one thing when it comes to podcasting, as well as having interesting content, because then it shows that you're serious about your podcast. So then your listeners will take you and your show seriously as well.
No, I totally agree. Because if you're going to flake out and not produce them, then I probably don't want to do business with you. Right?
Yes. That's the truth. Yeah, because that consistency shows that you're also serious about your business. And I will say, for my business, Speaking Your Brand, doing the podcast has been the best thing for it. It's a long game though. It took probably almost a year into the podcast where I started seeing the consistent momentum pick up from not just downloads, but from listener engagement. Because I tell people it's like a gestation period. It takes 9 to 12 months for like the podcast to get out there enough where people start finding it on their own. People are sharing it just organically, and people are then reaching out to you. And so you have to be willing to stick with it. It's definitely not instant gratification.
No, it's not, but it can be so fulfilling. Mm-hmm. It really can. So talk a little bit about some of the coaching that you do and some of the speaking that you do, because I am interested in that. And I did, you have a lot of free resources. You're very generous with your resources, and they're very good. Just if our listeners are looking to really grow their brand through speaking, grow their business, I highly recommend Carol and her resources, because I found them very valuable when I first kind of stumbled upon who you were and what you had to teach. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So I love putting together content. Again, as my background is, as being, well, not just in marketing, but in teaching as well. And so I do have a couple of guides that I can point listeners to. There's one on strategic speaking. So it kind of helps you to figure out what are good speaking opportunities to say yes to versus saying no to, who's your ideal audience, topics, things like that. So they can get that at speakingyourbrand.com/strategic. And they can opt in to get that PDF guide, and it has other resources in there too. And then the other one is on epic content. So you asked me what am I doing speaking wise? So this is a new presentation that I put together for the spring of 2019. I had a bunch of speaking engagements at different conferences, and the idea behind epic content is that your content, whether it's presentations, videos, anything that you're putting out, should have emotion in it. It should be purpose-driven. So based on what is your purpose, what is your why, and then connecting that with your audience's why. I is for innovation. So what insights or innovation are you sharing? Again, things that are different or new that people don't otherwise know. And then C in epic is for collaboration. So how are you inviting your audience in to participate in the experience, whether it's podcasting or speaking in front of people in person? So that epic content is at speakingyourbrand.com/epic. and they can download that, and that will give them more information on that framework. So as far as coaching, when we work with our clients, is that we're helping them to create their signature talk. And a signature talk is a presentation that is primarily used for lead generation. So again, you're going to conferences, business groups, associations, whatever it happens to be. And you want to teach something. So you want to share something that's valuable. Again, those insights and innovation related to your topic, your industry. But you also want to get leads from it, because a lot of times you're speaking for free, and there's nothing wrong with speaking for free. I still do it because leads can oftentimes be more worthwhile than the revenue from just speaking. But you have to do it in a way that's embedded in the content of the presentation, not just a hard right turn to a sales pitch at the end. That feels awkward for everyone involved. Instead, you integrate what you do, who you help, how you help them, the results that they get. You embed that into the content of your entire talk, your entire presentation. So your signature talk is really about who you are, what you do, and how you help people get the results that you do. And so that's what we help people with, is we help them to create their signature talk. And I have a whole framework that I've developed on it. And it's an intense process. Like I almost said fun, but I'm like, no, I don't really think people call it fun. They've called it magical. They've called it really focused. They've called it intense, but it's not. But because like we're asking questions and we're really excavating out of the person, what is it that's swirling around in their head that feels really messy to them? Because as it does to me, feels really messy. But then we take it out and we put it into a coherent and a cohesive format so that it actually becomes clear and usable, and then they have their talk and they're ready to go.
Yeah, and I think it comes across as authentic and not salesy and sleazy.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, 100%. Because if you've been helping your clients achieve certain results, you should, number one, be excited to share that. And it's not about convincing someone, like strong-arming them into buying. It's about showing, here's what's possible for you if this is where you're at, and this is something that you are facing as well.
Yes. Yeah, because you're trying to draw them in so that they can see that you may be the solution provider for whatever that problem is that they may have. Exactly.
And as the speaker, you're the expert authority standing in front of the room. All eyes and ears are on you, versus on social media. You post something on Instagram or on LinkedIn, maybe a few people will see it. I mean, it kind of just depends on the algorithms of the day, right? And then people are just scrolling. They're distracted. They're scrolling, versus you're there for 30 minutes or 45 minutes. You have their pretty much undivided attention. That is so precious to have. That's why I take speaking very seriously, and I take the content that we help our clients create really seriously, because you are taking someone's time, well, a whole group of people's time. So you want to make sure that you deliver value.
Yeah, it's an hour or 45 minutes they're not going to get back from their life, right? And so you want to be perceived as, truly value added in that time that they've spent with you. So absolutely. Yeah, I love that. So what are some of the things that you think if somebody's going to embark upon speaking to grow their brand, kind of like what I would call collateral assets or marketing pieces that they need to make sure that they kind of put in place to be able to get more speaking engagements, whether they're free or paid? So what are some of those things?
So the easiest thing to start off with is add onto your website a speaking page. So just add a page called speaking. Put your topics on there. So you don't even have to have 2 or 3 topics is fine. Just topics that you speak on, a little description of them, a little bit of background about you. Because imagine that someone is just going to the speaking page. So you want to have enough information about them, obviously a way to contact you, and let people know that you are available to speak, because people don't put 2 and 2 together unless you tell them. So definitely add a speaking page to your website. On your LinkedIn profile, put the word speaker. So in your headline, where you can put what it is that you do, a lot of times people just put their company name and they don't really fill it out, but you have a certain number of characters. So put that you're a speaker in there, and then add a section in your LinkedIn summary that you also do speaking, and list some of your topics there. Because people will look for speakers on LinkedIn. So that's a good way. Let your network and your colleagues know that you're looking for speaking engagements. Here are the topics that you talk about, and here are your ideal audiences, the audiences that would most benefit from those. So that's where I would start off with. And then look in your local community, find groups, associations, local chapters of national organizations, find groups that, again, have an audience in them that would benefit from your content, your topic. Attend some of their meetings or events, get to know them a little bit, get to know the type of people who attend, and then approach them and let them know that you have a topic that you think would be of value to your audience. Would they be interested in having you come speak at their next luncheon or next meeting or whatever it happens to be? A lot of these groups they're avidly looking for speakers. And so they're going to be happy that you approach them to do it. So like cold emailing people who have no idea who you are usually doesn't work very well. You want to start building those connections first.
Right. And then what do you do? So there's probably some people on the line that are terrified of public speaking and would never even think that this would be something that would be really a good fear to overcome in terms of being visible. Because I know a lot of women in particular have a fear of being visible. And this is you develop sort of a muscle, I think, to have the confidence to stand in front of a room of, 20 people, 40 people, 80 people, 300 people, 1,000 people, like whatever the stage size is. So what do you say to people like that? Because I do think that sometimes is a barrier.
Yes. So there are a few things. Number one, it truly does get easier the more you do it. I know it's such an easy thing to say, but it really does get easier the more you do it. So if this is something where you do have a fear of public speaking or you feel like you get really nervous, go to a group like Toastmasters. Toastmasters is great because they force you, they force you to get up and speak in front of a group of people. And there's different chapters of Toastmasters. Your city probably has a bunch. Find one that you like. And then, so that's going to be a great way to get the practice and repetition of speaking in front of people and doing that on a regular basis. So that's really helpful. The thing that I like to keep in mind is, especially when it comes to vulnerability, is that there's actually a biological, physiological reason that we feel vulnerable when we speak in public. So back tens of thousands of years ago, when we lived in the savannah, if we were standing in a savannah all by ourselves, exposed, we were vulnerable. We were vulnerable to having a predator come and take us down. So our minds, our primitive minds, don't understand that we're now in the year 2019 and we don't face those dangers. We're just standing in front of a group of people at a conference. But our brain is like, oh no, you're exposed. You're all by yourself, standing here with no protection. So what happens? Our hearts start to race. We get the butterflies in our stomach because all of our blood now is going to our legs to run away. It makes no sense because we don't need to be running away in that moment, but our brains don't know that. So once I understood the science, then I was like, oh, it makes sense. I just need to learn how to calm my body down, deep breathing exercises, the power poses, things like that it's going to be hard for me to convince my mind or my primitive mind that this is not happening. I just need to find a way to calm my body down. So doing that, there's visualization exercises you can do. Obviously, there's a lot of mindset work that you can do. So all of these things I oftentimes will help clients with as well, because even those of us who speak a lot, I still get nervous. If I'm speaking in front of a group of people or with new content and I want to do a really good job, I still get nervous. I don't think it's abnormal.
Right. Yeah. I'm sure you see that a lot too.
Yes. Yeah. I have people who come to me and said they've had panic attacks, like actual panic attacks when speaking. And we worked through all that and we did a lot of exercises. And then this one client I'm thinking of in particular, and then she went and did her talk and she did great. No panic attacks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One other thing I know I've started to do is when I talk, I either hire a videographer locally or I, have an iPhone on a tripod, just do it that way. So just to kind of build up, because people do want to see what you look like when you're starting to market yourself more as a speaker, and sort of as you kind of work your way up the kind of speaking circuit towards these more, paid opportunities. Because that's another thing is I've realized that speaking can become a revenue stream for my business.
Oh, yes, absolutely. So we talked a bit about the lead generation, so speaking for free. But yes, you can definitely do paid speaking. And there comes a point where you have enough experience in your business and in your topic and in speaking where it does make sense to get paid. So you can do it where you can do a workshop, where people pay to attend a workshop. So that's a great way to do it. Or you can approach organizations, even companies, corporations, and they'll oftentimes ask you what your speaking fee is, or you can let them know that you have a certain speaking fee. And so that is definitely a great way to add a revenue stream to your business, especially if you already enjoy public speaking and you want to go out and do it, then it's nice to get paid on top of it.
Yeah. So what about the other thing is, I think I, have read in your material and then working with your coach that works for you, Diane Diaz, that you can have a signature talk that you modify depending on the audience. So talk a little bit about that. Yeah,
so that's another thing that we're really big on is in repurposing your signature talk, because if it's just one version, okay, you have a 45-minute version that you can give at a networking group or a conference, okay, that's great, you have that, but then how else can you use it? So you can expand it into, say, a half-day workshop version. You could do a webinar for it. You could create, I have people who pull out content from their signature talk and create videos from it, or create email newsletters, email marketing because it's about what it is that they do and who they help. It makes sense that the content can be used in so many different ways. So when you think about wanting, though, to repurpose your talk for different audiences, I like to ask, what is the goal of the audience who's sitting there? What is it they want to achieve related to your topic? And then what are the problems that they're facing with, those obstacles or those challenges that they're faced with that is preventing them from achieving their goal? And then how can you help them get past those obstacles? And so if you think about that, then you can start adjusting either some of the points that you're making or some of the stories or examples that you're citing to fit that audience. So for example, if I was going to go talk to an audience of software developers, I'm going to use stories and examples that they can relate to in software development. Versus if I'm going to go talk to, say, a group of people in the healthcare field, I'm going to pull examples and stories in healthcare. Because it's much easier for us as the audience to understand the points that you're making if you can apply it in the context that we're used to.
Yeah, no, I think that is really, really true. You have to, it's back to kind of like your know, like, and trust factor. Mm-hmm. That's a big part of what you're trying to engender as you're up on stage talking to people or leading a workshop is people do business with people they know, like, and trust. And so by being authentic in that storytelling that you're doing and the value of the content value that you're adding to the audience and really understanding what their struggles are, what their frame of reference is really going to make you more relatable.
Yes, because I just, for those listening, think of a speaker that you've heard either at an event or at a conference, and think of the ones that you sat there and you're like nodding your head and you're like, oh yeah, I get that. Or yeah, I've experienced that too. Or they ask you like, show of hands, have you felt that? And you raise your hand like you're into it. So think about that. What did that speaker do that was compelling to you? They probably involved you as part of the audience. They probably asked questions. They shared stories that you could relate to. Now compare that to maybe some other speakers that you may have seen in the past where you didn't feel part of the experience. Maybe they just had a bunch of slides with bullet points on it that they were kind of just reading or going through, and they didn't really seem that passionate about it. They didn't really seem to care that they were there. The audience may as well have not even been there because they never even engaged the audience. So think about those two experiences and which one you would want as the audience member. And that's the one that you want to deliver as the speaker.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So my finale question is always, what's the bravest thing that you've ever done, and how does it inspire you today? And so you've made a lot of pivots in your life, but I really would like to know what that brave thing is that you did.
Oh, okay. Now I've been thinking about this, and this is a hard one. So I'll share a kind of just one, like a professional career one, because I could probably think of a personal one. But so professionally, I would say that it was the first time that I went on TV. So I was young, 30. I consider 30 to be young now.
Yes.
And again, I was chairperson of the Democratic Party in the county I lived at the time. And I remember I was going on, the anchor woman, she hosted a weekly political show that aired on Sunday mornings. So she invited me to come on, and I was going to be on with her. So this experienced anchor woman from the news was me, a sitting congressman. So he was currently a congressman. So I felt super imposter syndrome. I mean, incredible imposter syndrome. And then two other male reporters, journalists, who worked for like the newspaper and maybe a radio station in town, but political journalists. So they knew a lot. I mean, I knew some stuff, but they've been here in Orlando, especially for a long time. I was kind of new still. So I remember going in, and in this case for the show, they would tape it like on a Wednesday or Thursday, and it would air on Sunday. So it was called live to tape, where they just tape it. You're not supposed to mess up. Like, they're not going to fix the tape. It's just not airing live. So I remember going in there, and my heart was beating so fast. I literally thought I was going to jump out of my chest. I don't know if you've ever experienced that, but it was just like
you're going to have a stroke.
Yes. Like, I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to get control of this. Like, how am I going to sit here? Like, oh my God, it was unbelievable, because I was really nervous. Here's what causes nerves: the unknown. I didn't know what to expect because I had never done it before. Same thing with public speaking. It's the unknown that generates so much of the nerves. So I remember sitting there. Of course, they're great. They're bantering, and the anchor woman is really super nice and super helpful and all of that. And I go back and watch the clips now. Maybe I might have one on my website from my first one. And I have the clip, the show. And I go back and watch, and I'm like, oh, like, I actually sound like I have my stuff together. I certainly wasn't feeling that way at all. And so I consider it to be brave, because I guess I could have said no. I don't know. I didn't know if I felt like I could have said no, but I did it. Right. And then I kept going back and doing it. But I must say, again, the more you do it, the better you get. So by the time the end of the 2016 election cycle was coming around, I was in the TV studio probably 3 days a week, the month leading up to the election date. They were always pulling us in to, of course, talk about everything that was going on. So by the time we were doing that, I would walk into the studio, sit down, to do our segment, and it would be like a normal day. Like, I'm sitting here right now talking to you, because I was doing it so much, and that unknown factor had totally gone away. So that's why I said, like, if you feel like something is really scary, number one, just do it, because what's the worst that can happen? And then number two, you may end up actually liking it.
Right. 15 years later, here you are, right?
Yes, exactly. And what if I had said no? What if I had decided at the time, you know what, I'm too scared. I don't know what to expect. I'm just going to not do it.
Right. Do it scared anyway.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, I'm glad you decided to be brave, and look where you are now, and the things that you're doing, and the people that you're able to impact, and the people you're able to teach what you've learned on your journey. So I just want to thank you, Carol, for what you're doing. I love your podcast. I want people to listen to your podcast. I want them to check out your resources and your programs. I think that you are adding value out there in the world of learning how to speak your brand. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, well, thank you, Tracy. And thank you for interviewing women and for putting their stories out there as well. Because when we have those role models to look forward, that's where we realize that we can do this as well.
Exactly.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Brave Girls with Tracy M. as much as I did creating it. Each show is produced with you, the listener, in mind, as you look for inspiration and motivation from other brave souls as you pursue your desires. I'd love to hear your feedback, so please leave me a review on iTunes. I read every one. And check out my website, tracym.com, for more free resources. You can also join my list and sign up for my newsletter right from the homepage. Until next time, stay strong, believe in your dreams, and go do something brave.
We appreciate you joining us for this episode of Brave Girls with Tracy M. and hope that you enjoyed the show. For more information about today's episode, as well as additional free resources to help you achieve greatness in your life, visit tracym.com and sign up for our mailing list. Until next time, dream big, believe in yourself, and let your brilliance shine as only you can do.